Welcome to YouTube Masterclass. This is Dr. Aaron Sheley. I got my PhD at California Institute of the Arts. Did my undergrad work at University of Southern California, and we're teaching a class for both of those schools as well as Harvard, which is the great school out east in Boston, Massachusetts, and it's a beautiful school. And whoever takes it remotely these days can get through the program with a series of tests and dissertations and other artistic works depending on the classes you're taking. Comparative literature, you have to have a fairly high aptitude for comparative literature, which you'll see what that is, a program at Harvard that represents their version of a film school because they compare it to novels, and particularly novels compared to other novels like the Harvard great books of Harvard. And there's 115 Harvard classics, and a lot of them are rare stories, even like Washington Irving type authors that are burgeoning around the time of the Romance and the late Romantic novels. And now we're here in this class, and it's funny because as educational as this is and as purposeful as this is, we always think of these things that we're talking about as kind of trivial sometimes. Like we think special effects are a trivial matter, that they're just like generated by a computer automatically and it tells everybody how to create the effect, and everybody just says, oh, that was cool because now Batman can fly a little bit. And so everybody thinks that's cool, but they kind of trivialize it as this kind of thing that's not worth paying attention to. But on the other hand, we do oftentimes consider what would it be like to fly. So really, we do actually dream and imagine in a special effects realm anyway, and that's where special effects come from, is from the imagination. And I think the next couple of films we talk about will illustrate that these films are the magic of special effects, but from an imagination that we all think of often because we're like, oh, so that phaser shot at that guy. We take that for granted. But then we think the nature of that is I don't have a phaser, but if I did, would I be able to stun someone with my photon gun? In reality, or is that just an imagined thing of the special effect that we now have in our subconscious, that that's what a phaser or a lightsaber looks like because we've seen it so often, so we think that's what it is. And in the movie context, it's real anyway because these imaginary worlds are claiming themselves to be real narratives. Whether they're fiction or not, fiction doesn't necessarily mean it's not real, but that just means within an imagination realm, because you got to come with me. The imagination is like special effects. You got to plant it on this grid of where you store your imaginative pictures. And I'm not saying you're seeing pictures, I'm saying you're thinking of what a picture would look like and imagining it in your mind. I mean, the Last Supper might have come out of a lot of processes, but when you're looking at the actual grid of what's on your imagination, you could imagine a dragon, like the Dream Dragon. And you could think that that is a real picture, but it's not on a picture yet. But somewhere, maybe in like some game theory, there's a way to save those pictures. I don't know. But one way to save those pictures is these classic special effects movies. And we're going to talk about a classic and a modern one. And first, we're going to go through Forbidden Planet again because we need to discuss a few things about the nature of special effects in Hollywood in the 1950s, because they were burgeoning, not just because of the CinemaScope standard of Forbidden Planet, which is 2.85 to 1 screen ratio of widescreen. And this is the Blu-ray, so it's of course shown on the widescreen format as well as the DVD. Walter Pidgeon's in this, Leslie Nielsen in a serious role, as serious as it gets. Anne Francis is in this. She's the beautiful girl on the planet. So this one's interesting because they go to a planet and they land on it, and it's much more like Star Wars in that sense, but at the same time the spaceships are like UFOs. They're like flying saucers in this. It's really weird. And like their ship is a bigger ship than the UFO, but there's a lot of UFOs at the beginning of this flying around, and they're not doing it the Ed Wood style where you put a paper plate on a stick. And I always thought that was cool, the paper plate on a stick. We did that as kids, and that's a cool way to do UFO. And you got to admit, Ed Wood's UFOs don't look too bad. I mean, but these UFOs look cool, but they're actually less high tech in a way than Plan 9. And actually, the one in this, though, follows a linear narrative. Not to say that Plan 9 from outer space, just because it doesn't follow any linearity or not. doesn't make it bad. I'm just saying that this one does follow a more obtrusive or imaginative plot that you can follow with your own mind, and Plan 9's kind of this like mishmash of images, and it's cool too. Plan 9's like flicking through the channels on every sci-fi movie that's on right at that time. I tried to do one of those with one of my shows where you just flick through the sci-fi, and you can do that to a degree with the sci-fi genre because of how generous they are with letting you use their clips in your program. But let me just tell you that this one isn't really good in non-widescreen and classical ratio because they kind of cut off the sides and pan and scan. And we don't really use that format anymore because now we're on to Blu-rays or 4K or the internet's even these videos are even greater than 4K because we have the internet and all these supreme 4K converters, and they go into this hyper digital mode and they collect all the cells. But going back to that imagination thing, we have these things on the grid. There's an alien in this that you see towards the end of the movie. And the alien is like this beast that's like invisible, and it's animated over the top of it in like this kind of laser beam effect, and they're shooting laser beams at it, and you see the lasers hit the beast, and when you couldn't see him, he was invisible, but when the laser guns hit him, then you see this like invisible beast. And this is towards the end when they're fighting the final threshold guardian, and these threshold guardians come about in Forbidden Planet. There's this whole Tempest by Shakespeare plot to it where like they have this underground, and it's like this metropolis. It's like all these undergrounders built the planet and keep the planet going, and they build this planet, and then you see all this like giant massive like elevators and switchboards and everything that the people underground, whoever they are, the Morlocks or whatever, are the ones that build the whole city and make everything work. Whether they're like Planet of the Apes or not is never totally revealed. That whole place does get somewhat destroyed, and Walter Pigeon is like this dictator over everything, and he shows them the big underground, and the big underground is a special effect. It's like a big set built. It's like one of those Fifth Element sets where everything is dimensional to the rotation of the degree where the camera is placed. And you'll see that makes a big effect on having hyperbole in the long-lasting and even more of an effect term positioning the parabola or the object down the spire so that it looks like the spiral goes on down forever, like on that 9 Inch Nails album where it looks like that spiral goes on forever. And the other thing I want to mention about Forbidden Planet, we won't spend a lot of time on Forbidden Planet because I have a lot to talk about with The Matrix. The Matrix gets pretty crucial in a minute. But as far as like the special effects throughout Hollywood, I mean, you have the early days of even Gold Diggers of 1933 where those ladies would pop through the floor and they'd get out and they'd dance. And just popping through the floor like comes back in Hard Day's Night, the all-time special effects movie where they're using fast forward, slow down, rewind, and they're all running all over the place. I know that was after this, but these are more like Star Wars, like on-frame special effects. And then the actual editing special effects are like reverse and fast forward. Hard Day's Night. Hard Day's Night uses jump cuts. It uses extreme close-ups. It has that whole flash photo thing that's on the cover of the album where they take pictures of the Beatles and they're all shaped they're all looking in different ways. That's a editing special effect where you do it after effect. And these are After Effects too, in the sense that they put the laser beam on the cannon, and when it shoots, then it's like, well, that's an effect we've added in. And with this one, it's all about optical printing. And so they take each piece of the light beam that shoots from the laser, and they draw it onto a field of imaginary range with probably a digital source, or now it's with a digital, but at this time it was with a light source. That they'd make cutouts and they'd make arrangements and that they'd paint and that they'd make these on-frame special effects, was because then they would take that object, put it in the optical printer, however they had designed it with whatever, and the optical printer would print it in a line based on how they aligned it to print it in a way that would put it on to the film stock itself and print it on there for the laser beam to shoot. So we see how they use matte painting also in this to show, show you. And even on this cover, you can kind of get the sense that they're going to use matte painting in this, because not that this is a matte paint, but they paint the image behind in the background, like since Wizard of Oz, basically. The matte painting is where they design the whole background to look like the background they want to show in the movie, depending on where they take the set to. So really, that's how you do it on a sound stage. If you're not where you need to be, you build where you need to be right there on the set, and that's how you come up with the idea of matte painting. And most Hollywood films are filmed on a studio set, and that is still true about matte painting today. They still make these big crosshairs on how they're going to do the in-camera effect, and that's how they do it, is they paint the background to look exactly like the place that they're in. And they do that all throughout Forbidden Planet. And that other thing about the spiral going down, in the terms of Forbidden Planet, that was also a matte painting. It also came down and showed the structure. It's a foregrounder, but they came down with the structure to show that painting look like it goes on forever. And it actually looks like a real, like, city below the earth where everything's run. And I mean, we could talk interestingly about critical discussions of the matter, about the nature of the nuclear family, and how there's the Cold War's emerging, and there's the fear of outsiders, and yet there's the accept the military, and there's the dictatorial ease of utopia life in a not just Forbidden Planet, but Lonely Planet. There's only like 5 people on the planet at once, except for all the Morlocks that run it below the ground. And you could say the Tempest does ring a bell for Forbidden Planet, that the Tempest is all about a world that's made by slaves, basically, and we live in the lap of luxury without even knowing it. We don't ask for that, but we have the lap of luxury. So really, these effects do stem from the fact that the story itself and the sci-fi nature of it being the science fiction. Now, science fiction as a genre we have discussed, but what a lot of it has to do with is man's obsession or man's curiosity about the mysteries of science. I mean, that's science fiction. Man's curiosity about the mysteries of science. So, like, you could say the mystery of space, the mystery of magic, the mystery of the earth, the mystery of the moon, the mystery of the rivers, the mystery of the stars. So you could say there's mysteries of science that we apply to solutions of in science fiction. So the mysteries of science are what sci-fi stems from. And what I mean about a mystery is you could have the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster and investigate whether there's a Loch Ness Monster or not, and you could go looking for it and you could find it. But the mysteries of science, now you're going to need special effects for the mysteries of science, because a lot of that's left up to the imagination, with or without a result that comes in close to that, even though there are some nowadays, with the whole DNA thing being what DNA is, the DNA to select correctly, like, is there a correct pattern of DNA that makes your livelihood better, the mysteries of science. So now we have it in these other ways that's released through science fiction, and science fiction is the mystery of science solved in the way of the narrative that I'm about to present to you. And I know that's a lot at once, but we're looking also critically at these films, but now we see why the nature of the imagination field goes into our illustrating, especially around this time of the Ray Harryhausen effects, which he did help with this movie. But there's these whole effects that have the moving imagery that's being taken a photo at a time. And even though most photos are taken a photo at a time, they're taken 24 frames a second. And again, that's where you measure the time based on the sound and the image to adjust to the 1/24th of a second of where your picture needs to be placed, because you're going to need 24, maybe even 29 frames a second in these visual fields that are persistence vision, that make it look like it's moving, properly moving the way it would move, even if it's a blast of a laser. It would move properly in that way, imaginatively. And you would think if you saw it in the future, it would probably look about the same way, but it might be a little different. I don't know. I've never really been in a situation where I've seen too many 1950s versions of a laser gun shot. Nowadays, it's done with digital medium. And the digital medium you still have to take the picture of each frame that you build on the computer, but at least now you can measure it to the proximity of down to the wire, the pinpoint of where you need to move each frame, so it moves so smoothly that you just, again, take it for granted that you see that normally in a movie. So I could go into Forbidden Planet a little more, and I love the fact that they save the day and that they get out of there and that they have a good trip through outer space, and that really the nuclear family, the Cold War, all those things coming up, and all the isolationism and all the xenophobias of the 1950s totally come across in this. The female is kind of subjugated to looking beautiful, and she is beautiful in the movie, but that they're all out to, like, not really, they're out to protect her. She's like some protect me type. And from the evils of this planet, even though there aren't any, but there are, she doesn't really know that the Morlocks work so they can enjoy their life. I don't really know how all that system worked out, but I guess if you have a huge system of slavery, you can totally live on the top of all of it. And there's that whole message too. You can see how that has to do with miscegenation and whatever else. And these guys are from Earth. What planet are you from? I mean, that's about as far as I can take that metaphor. But we have a lot to talk about today, and there's more to this class today. This is the special effects class, 409. It's a 409, so all these so far are like senior year classes, but they're a little easy enough for you at home to take them and kind of follow along. And it's mainly not really so much for a home course, this YouTube masterclass, but it's more for a COURSERA course, which is through a college. Like, I've had my friends collect credits for this class. Not just the summer one, which hasn't ended yet, so we haven't collected credits for it, but I've actually had 6 people I know get 8 credits out of last year's 2 semesters. So I've already taught a year. So this is nothing brand new, but these are still within their development stage of how they're going to go. And I think that the showing of the cover is the key to keeping these going, because then we can all stare at it till we remember what the film was, because now we're all off book, right? Well, you don't have to be off book. I recommend David Bordwell's History of Film Narrative, or History of Film. And both of those books are really good. And so Kristen Thompson writes with them, and they have a whole history of the world cinema. There you go. And one of the covers they used was a Matrix cover, but that's not the point. The point is, the Matrix brings up a really rare opportunity for us to really get into this whole idea of an imagined visionary field. Is the particles in space, like not the movie, but are the like by Lin Lai, right? But are the particles in space all connected to some kind of like visual field that if we imagine something, like everybody imagine a green dragon. I'm imagining a green dragon. Are the particles in that green dragon really there? Do they subsume there because there's energy in my mind portraying a dragon in my mind? Do I project it at all onto a real field of play? Or is that just a noumenal, fictitious, like thoughtful world that doesn't exist and I'm kind of thinking about it? Well, the Matrix questions the nature of reality in the way that all the subcodes and subparallels of the Matrix are going through this big number stream. And the number stream is this idea of a matrix where in the number stream there's sometimes patterns, sometimes not, but there's sometimes not patterns, are patterns in and of themselves, and you can kind of see them coming from the patterns of the numbers that are within themselves. And all those things digitally create a picture that we're reproducing onto a digital medium. So if you're recording on a digital medium, you're automatically putting the pictures, again, in this kind of like film strip persistence way, but more so in a number code that reflects and relays what the images and picture really are when played back. It's like the imaginary realm of taking a picture with those old emulsifiers that would blow up on the halide and create an imprint on the photo of these pictures, but still the induction is kind of mysterious and would take us too long to go through that. The induction of a photo, we need to talk about how they're all effects, but that you can change the way the photo looks with the special effects to your own suiting. And I think that's what gets people a little irked about special effects, is that if the picture doesn't look exactly the way they want it, but that's not it. These are realms that imagine the scientific on what the mysteries are of the scientific, and that's why you show a sci-fi movie. And these are like digital numbers that are in these long streams, and they're just streaming on and on. And so you go and you're looking at the numbers, and you're like, somewhere in this, there's a code that reflects this other reality, this like ulterior reality in this movie, of like there's more than one reality, and there's more than one place you can be at one time, and there's more than one you, and there's more than one choice you can take, and there's more than one road to go down, and there's more than one way to change your circumstances, and that everything is affected in these kind of digital takeover movies of the Matrix. And the Matrix came right at around 2000, where the digital effects were just burgeoning to their absolute max, and they still are to this day. There's been kind of a slow train moving on the cinema, but what we see with Dune 2 being so beautiful and irascible in a great way, irascibility greatness, and it's got this whole uh, stinging effect to it, that like the effects are getting bigger and they're wilder and they're more confusing in a good way, and you're like lost in this madness, and you're just like, these effects are big and they're these huge sweeping, so we're not like headed away from a special effects cinema. And I really think this movie has a lot to do with why special effects cinema became such a blockbuster, because when it came out, it did actually do very extremely well at the box office. And a lot of it had to do with was is people really did want to see a bigger screen. They wanted to see a bigger screen. And the screen is where the projector is onto. So now you've got the picture, or number code. You got the picture, but the picture only really receives and comes up when transmitted out onto a projector. So now you got to build a projector, and that's where the film strip goes through, and it's the same thing that a magic lantern does. A light shines through the picture and comes onto the screen. That's the synthetic mess, and that's the organic way to do it. The film stock goes through the light 24 frames a second and looks like it's moving on the projector screen that's showing it. How it makes that imprint? Well, it blows up. A little pack of nitride in the film blows up and sticks a shot onto the picture. It's a really interesting way of thinking about how pictures are taken. And those are actually, there are actually other wheels like the zoetrope to show what a bunch of pictures in a row look like when they move. And there's a light next to them. So the projector, we can kind of see how it works, because there's an imprint of something that the light is shining behind it. Now, lose me in the digital world. Do we really have to do the algorithms between digital code to digital code? Did we already code that? Did we code that in an AI that will help us find another solution with another kind of code? Because, again, you can use special effects in AI, but that Matrix doesn't really use AI special effects. Even till you get into the third one, it's kind of confusing, because they did have the same kind of programs that would generate mountains of quantum physics and mountains of algorithms and mountains of logarithms, and they'd all be tied into these even trigonometrical codes that are all going through this like Leibniz data, you know. You're like, okay, well, now we've got the scene of Keanu Reeves and every choice he makes in this movie, The Matrix, the sci-fi from 99, 2000, and he every choice he makes as a regular cool guy leads him more and more to be this like superhero in a veil of data that is digital, that will transport you to these different worlds. And there's sort of these good worlds where he can help out, or like good worlds where he can meet with his friends, but bad worlds where he has to fight people, but good worlds that he can plug into anything and learn it instantly. And that they have, we talked about the guy in this being the Young Ping Po, and we talked about him being this really great like technical advisor to the choreographers of a movie. And by choreography, I mean the battle play of Kung Fu, and he teaches Kung Fu to the actors, and that everybody learns Kung Fu for the film school in that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which he did the special choreography, special effects for the sword fights in that, and Kill Bill, and Kill Bill Volume 2. So you see that he's a very, very laudable and credible choreographer of battlefield effects, and that he likes doing kung fu movies, and that he's done like Iron Monkey. I don't know if he was on Peking Opera Blues, but that's another good one where they're all flying around, and all the special effects in Peking Opera Blues show them flying around in these different ways, and these ninjas are jumping and they're leaping and they're dancing and they're singing and they're all over the place, dude. And it's just like the special effects keep them flying so long that you forget that you're watching a flying swordsman movie with movies like that. And this one, you forget you're watching a flying gunman movie, but he's not really flying. They do have a ship, they do have a dress code, they do eat rather well, but in the future, all you got to do is battle the robots that are coming from the bad Matrix, which is the code that's going to rip everything apart. And I don't know if they ever solved that by the end of the third Matrix, or even in the Animatrix. Now, the Animatrix I've got to talk a little bit about here, because the Animatrix is a very exciting animation film that rose from these Matrix movies. In the Matrix movie, I have more to say, but when the Wachowski sisters did this movie, and I think they're cool, and whatever they do is cool. But like they did do Lawrence Fishburne's in this, yeah, Keanu Reeves, Catherine Ann Ross. As far as critically, we could talk about how in the 90s it was cool to be like this like insider and be like choosing all the counter-reflective moves, or like not counterproductive but counter-culture type moves. You know, how to be the anachronistic, how to be kind of a rebel. You know, it's that whole Hollywood I'm a badass kind of thing. This is how to be a badass. And then Animatrix takes it to this whole narrative where it's like setting up how the Matrix kingdom works, and we'll discuss that a little bit here. But the Animatrix comes in and says, well, in the dawn of man, no, we're not talking about that. So there's these ninja fights, and there's these battles, and some of them are probably strategized by some of the same choreographers of battle, special effects, and stuntmen that they are. They're stuntmen, too, and that a lot of people will do their own stunts, that Keanu Reeves supposedly and Lawrence Fishburne supposedly learned Kung Fu, perhaps, but that they're staged to make it look as though they know how it is, means that they pretty much learned it anyway. And now you look at the Animatrix, and it's all animated cartoons, and you get these. But the one that I want to talk about is the Robot Holocaust, because it seems to me that there are movies that have these special effects in them of like the end of the robot war. And like, I don't really know what all those are. I know Transformers are those movies where all the robots are fighting, and it's like the end of the robot war and everybody's crushing each other. And it's like I said about Michael Bay's movies, I like blowing up robots. I mean, I don't like blowing up robots, but I mean, I like when robots are blowing up. Like when robots blow up other robots, then it's like the natural Ed Woodian ending of a robot war. And by Ed Wood, I'm not condemning anyone by this. It's a strategy we must follow through the history of filmmaking, because even though in some of the worst scenarios of sci-fi and some of the high-class scenarios of sci-fi, this is really high-class sci-fi. I mean, this is high, top-notch. This is like top-dollar sci-fi Matrix. And this is too, but for its time, this has seemed to age more well than the other ones. So I can't come right now. And then, so they have this question on this top dollar animation. When they animate it and it's 3D style and it looks like that choreography of Battleground special effects, and the camera goes swishing around, and we'll get back to the Robot Holocaust in a second. When the camera goes swishing around, they put a line of digital cameras in a row that are all filming, and so when it goes around, they can slow down and pick up where the camera shot is in alignment to the actual reality as they go around. So they'll keep filming it, but not from the same camera, from like many different cameras that are popping off, like they did that horse race with W.K.L. Dixon, where the horse is revealing that all four of its legs are off the ground at one time. and when it's trotting, because all four legs lift up. You could only get that with series photography, which is to place each camera next to each other. So the series photography of the Matrix is to fade all the moving shots that are barely shot next to each other of the image that's going around by the camera, and that will make it look like it's revolving sideways through there. And that's how they do that in the Matrix. I thought I'd expose that little secret. I got that off of a LA Times movie trailer when I was going to film school in LA, and I was like, well, they showed how to do that Matrix, isn't it, on the movies, you know? But so the robot holocaust. Now get me this. There is a robot holocaust in the movie AI, and AI is a great movie because one of the things I love about it is it totally signifies what we're all like fighting against today, but like we've all already created and it's already taken over. So if AI is already taken over and everybody, like, not the movie, but like, get this, the movie kind of has this whole like effect that it like it's going to take over and this is what it's going to be like, but we're already going to be that way by the time we get there. So we're only complaining about it now because we're already pretty much there. And see, that's a little different than knowing about it ahead of time and telling people. It's like, well, we got there and we're not totally convinced, we need to find out how. But we're already there and this is what it is, so here we go. And the AI has this robot, and you'll have to forgive me because I don't have the AI cover right here with me. But it's got Haley Joel Osment in it. And those AI discs are very valuable because we're not talking about the system AI. Now, the system artificial intelligence we discussed in video game history a while back as being the AI sensor that goes off when something is battling another figure in the game, even in ping pong. But they didn't have AI in Pong. But they had AI in Street Fighter where it's like you throw a punch, it hits him, but then the computer memorizes that move, how it does it. It traces what buttons you're pressing. See, the computer is tracing the button you're pressing right as it's pressing. But then when it comes to game engines, and this is interesting for the Animatrix because a lot of times they use game engines later to be the visual field of representation of the imagination onto the digital medium of cinema. And so they take these pictures in their mind, and then like nowadays you say that you can actually take a picture and they would carve it out onto some like medium basis by drawing all the points of the picture and having all those points honed in on how you want the picture to look and where you want to situate the picture of that pinpointed accuracy of the picture of your imagination that's coming from it, generally based on a visual medium that's already there. The pictures are already in the frame that you're going to be putting the digital medium over, even if the picture is from directly the digital medium. And that gets a little confusing. But the point is that like with movies like The Animatrix and AI, you have these very strategical points of how robots basically take over. You get iRobot, a movie like that with Will Smith, and then it's like the robot takeover movie is only interesting because the eventual eradication of the robot takeover is the robot holocaust. And these things play out like Night of the Living Dead, and I'm not saying that the zombie holocaust at the end of Night of the Living Dead really affirmed that I missed like some of those Italian directors like Mario Bava and how he made those big setups where like witches are burning all over the soundstage, but it looks like one big backdrop to madness, the whole shot. And you see these things in the Matrix though that are coming from these like revolutions of digital medium. Now here's an example of where they had the medium at the time and they had to build onto the medium, and that's mostly what they do now. They have the medium and they build onto it. This being before AI is only interesting because the robot holocaust in Animatrix is legendarily after AI. So I'm not sure who had the idea of a robot crunching world, but the robot crunching in AI is interesting. Now the AI that video games pick up and bat around and throw at you is not the same as all the functions you can do with it now. But in special effects, like in the Elemental, the hair in that was AI. And that just makes for a wild special effect because it takes in all these matrices, like the Matrix, ties them all in together, brings them all to one course, and lets them loose in this kind of hip, fantastic visualization of the phantasmagoric that all develops from the imagination and its connection with this picture, whether it's made with codes or an imprint. And I don't prefer necessarily the imprint, because now the code that George Lucas digital and everything else that went digital is a code of imprints. And so was everything else, just because it can be reduced to numbers, and just because it can be reduced to digital patterns and algorithms. And you got to understand that a logarithm like read-only memory and an algorithm like random access memory have to work hand in hand, even in a video game, so that you can access the interactive, the RAM, with the solidly locked down parts that are already there, the ROM, and then you have the answer, which is the sort of interaction between random and ROM, which is a video game. And that video games are, to our astute imagination now, and that everything we've ever imagined and thought about were in the realm of video games. And we have a little more time to talk today, but the fact that the Matrix is built stereotypically like a very video game is not so surprising when you realize they plug in to themselves switches, and that's how they play the electronic of video game. And so this looks like, but they're in a movie which doesn't rely so much on anything but read-only memory. That movies are used in digital computers that have RAM and ROM, because to form a computer image, to conform a computer image of anything like, say, the world ending, you'd have to have random access memory to film and locate the position and place in the special effect. But the read-only memory is like the projected from the projector, because the projector is still processing. So all the digital processes go here, like the filming and the playing, but the showing back is read-only memory, so that this is DVD and the Blu-rays and everything are really read-only memory. That there is some random access memory in the compunction of newer and more interactive mediums, maybe so. But that algorithms were determined for things like getting this movie to work and getting this movie to go, and what this movie's about is like algorithms anyway. And like it's like all the algorithms will be selected based on what logarithm they came from, right? In quantum physics. So now we've got this idea that everything comes from a large stream of quantum physics, but somebody entered bad code, and now we've all got to go eradicate the bad code. And here's the robot holocaust factor. We're eradicating bad code, but the bad code was actually what backfired and eradicated everything else, right? So, and I'm only going to stick with this for another 10 minutes, because I realize that we have to press pause for our next class discussion. But I'm so glad we discussed this today. I'm so glad that we can discuss like a logarithm being like 0 or less than infinity, or less than 1. And the 1 is 100%. So we know we can't get there, because that's 100% totalitarian completion of the picture. 0 is nothingness, so it doesn't exist, because you can't go to somewhere where there's only nothing. And if you could, you wouldn't exist, because you're somewhere where there's nothing, and there's not you, because it's not you, because there's nothing. So 0 is not real. But everything in between, from down to the subdivided, down to the infinite potential of a subdivision. Because division goes on forever, as Newton found out. It's great. So now we've got all these number codes that are infinite. We can store a number anywhere, in any way, on the internet, on the digital medium. We can keep storing numbers, and we can store any image or potent or computer or anything with a number. You can store a magic spell with a number. You can store things with a number. I'm telling you, and it works that way, because you can subdivide everything nearly or completely infinitely. So it's a very It's a very intriguing idea, the digital medium, because it never runs out of space potentially, because you can always store things under another subdivided number. So that's one way to look at the whole picture of these special effects in these digital movies. I don't think we could really go into what, like, how does an image come from a subdivision? Well, a lot of that's binary code, and here we go, 0 and 1 at the logarithm, at the basic algorithm mode, because we're bouncing back between 1 being a gate. So anywhere there's ones in a cluster of digitized medium, which is 0, 0, 1, 0, 1 binary, you look at the cluster of ones and they sort of form this picture as those ones, which represent actual subdivisions of the one. But they say one because they're closer to being a real number than a completely zeroed out number. 0 is the gate closer, so when you want to close the gate, wham, the electronics will go. That the image comes from the gate and the closed gate of 0, the gate of 1, that it forms a picture from that. I'm not an engineering scientist enough to say I know how they do it, other than that they store the medium actually in the ones now, but the ones then could actually transmit code that would transmit more code that would transmit more code, and like after about 100 codes are transmitted, you'd have a little dude hopping around. I mean, on a computer screen. So I don't know exactly how patient you have to be to do coding. I did do some coding for a friend once, and it was hardcore. It was like there were 30 sheets of coding to do, and we did like a sheet of coding. And it took me like, a day, 7 hours to do a computer coding for like a page and a half or 2 pages. It was hard, man. Computer coding goes on forever, and when you do it, you have to be really into it. So now that they're making a movie about the nature of computer coding, is already my style. I like that. I like that there's so many jobs out there where you have to do nothing but computer coding, and then it's binary, and then it's into operational subdivisionaries, and you're putting code of mirror images of blocks of picture, blocks of sound on them with the digital medium and the internet digital medium. So now you're reflecting these blocks of codes in a way by saying, well, all we are is blocks in a code, bro. All we are is blocks in a code, because now everything is digital, so everything's digital. I mean, this very recording that I have going is digital. This very picture of this matrix cover is digital. It's all digitized. But that it's reflected to look like the filmmaking process is kind of there, but kind of is different with this kind of recording. And I'm not going to exactly tell you how good this camera is that I'm using, but this camera can make you look good. This camera can make you look weird. This camera, just by changing where you're in the position. And I am kind of sorry that we don't have any special effects really in this show. I could show you clips, but I think what's important is that you imagine yourself carrying around your pictures on this kind of visual field. And I'm not saying see things that aren't there. I'm saying see things in your mind, with your mind, not with your sight. If you see it with your mind, then you're fine, because you know it's just in your head. But if it's a picture you want to reflect onto a medium, you can do that through your imagination by copying down what's in your imagination. And that's where I'm getting at with the painting thing, because you're still copying down what you're seeing in your imagination. So that these films are like paintings, and that they're using the cameras like paintings is more proof that there's matte paintings probably in both of these. Now, these use more of the blue screen rules. See, this was a little before blue screen, but these use more of the blue screen rules, where you do matte paint, but you matte paint onto a picture that's being reflected onto whatever the blue screen behind them is. And the blue screen and the body motion sensors, which they kind of invented body motion sensors for the gunfights in Matrix, and all the moves they do, and all the cool badass jumps they do, and jumps from building to building and everything. That was all digitally recreated by special effects. And the Matrix has this whole motion control thing where they're with blue screens, and the blue screen behind them, well, when the movie plays back, then the blue screen reflects the picture that was taken for the matte painting, basically, instead of, and shown as the image behind in the background, and where it all is, because you can kind of see in this picture how there's a background image now digitally recreated, still by a blue screen, but digitally recreated other than showing the picture from it. That was sometimes how they showed the matte painting in movies like Wizard of Oz, where they would take the picture and then put it in the background, or they'd put a picture next to a background they designed, or they'd paint right onto the film. I mean, it's weird. Some of those matte paintings in like Neverending Story with the stars so blurry bright are just so beautiful, you know. In the recent selection of my Criterion festivals and Criterion Help, I released a Neverending Story Criterion. Oh, it's on my YouTube playlist site. Go see it, dude. It's so sweet. The special effects are like speaking of laser shooting from the eyes, but when the statues on both sides are opening their eyes and shooting at Atreyu with their zappers or whatever and blow up the ground, I mean, you're just like, whoa, I surrender. And whether you're saying I surrender to the special effects or the laser beam, or I surrender to the Matrix because of the gun battles with all the kung fu, or I surrender to Forbidden Planet for the Tempest downward spiral looking metropolis land. Utopia is still that they're discussing. This Blade Runner is totally down this realm, except now there's more robots we gotta destroy, right? If there's anything that went wrong with the future, there's robots we gotta destroy. I mean, no way can you back out of that narrative. So, but, and there will be those robots to destroy in the Matrix, and that I really enjoyed having this class with you. That we'll talk about a few last things. The digital medium that it's recorded onto is again through lasers and numbers and binaries and things that conform to where we've packaged hidden icons, and that comes from the day of the DVD, which was about the year 2000. 2005 that we converted to the DVD system, and then in 2015 kind of to the Blu-ray system. And it was before 2015, it was like 2008 maybe, to Blu-ray, and then we kind of went on to better and better things, and now we're at this 4K digital thing, and all these movies reflected in a 4K machine wouldn't necessarily play, but they would if they had an adjusted one. But the Blu-rays don't play in the DVD player, but the DVD plays in the Blu-ray player. So now the DVD is not worthless because everybody's got so many DVDs of things they collected. Then they go to the Blu-ray and they're like, well, what the heck? Now I can only play Blu-rays. But no, they can play DVDs in a Blu-ray player. It's a miracle. It's one of those miracles of life that you can't but not forgive the universe for not creating a God to create it. But I have essentially discussed with you today the key effects of having your own visual field narrative of imagination. Transferring that like a painting or an imprint or a digital recording that will mirror image what you're looking at through the mirror still, the mirror of the digital code, and still replace it onto video, what that object is of image, and play it back for you. And that is the essential building block of film. That you can alter that image, and we have not altered the image on this except for lighting and technique and everything. But if we can alter the image of the parallel reality that's being shot from the mirror, that is special effects. Altering the image, not just changing it with sound and editing and lighting and production technique and cinematography, but also putting the special effect into the film to change the way and alter the way that the image or sound, and there are sound special effects, a lot of sound special effects in these movies, from the lasers to the gun, you know, there's special effects in these movies that are sound effects. And if they alter the image or sound in any way that wasn't picked up in the original recording, which even like studios from like Dogma 95 say they do, but they really don't, because you can layer sound with those kind of natural recordings and picture with natural recordings without even adjusting the image. Yeah. So, and those Dogma 95 things are really cool. I like them a lot. You should check into that. Do one of those if you got it enough of what it takes or whatever, you know. But the Matrix sound effects, special effects in the Matrix, see, a regular sound effect would be something that went in the movie, but it'd still be a special effect. But altering the way the reality would go according to a recording is a special effect. Not just costume design on the interior being like the key to Nosferatu, but like the costume design essentially here with the sound effects of the creaking leather of his outfit and how great he is. Now, the one last thing I'll leave you with is some of the special effects and sound effects are hard to distinguish between the sound effects of the necessary Foley artist who's doing the movements and like adjustments and touching and things like that that make sound. And my voice being made sound is a direct recording to like a right on. It's right through the track, onto the track, and then back through the track. It's through the track, onto the track, and back through the track. But sometimes you have to align it, or it's in different wavelengths, and you have to like have one person talking here, record it, one person talking here, and that's automated dialogue loop. Now we're starting to get to the point that all sound effects are start sounding like special effects. This is not the case. That sound effects are to make the real image and the real sound, the sound as crisp as it is, but special sound effects are all the ones that are altered, especially for alternate realities like sci-fi. Altered special effects sounds to make it sound real. Those two areas overlap and collide so much, but we will discuss this more at the next masterclass. I hope you took notes today. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you know I wouldn't go if I didn't have to. But I'll come back and I'll bring my treasure full of tricks and we'll all get into it and we'll see if we can find something crazy to talk about in special effects. And I think we can do that. All right, we'll see you later, class. This is Dr. Sheley at Masterclass, and we'll talk to you at class 7, I think, or 8 of this class next week. All right, we'll talk to you then. Bye.